All right. Hello, everyone, and bon appétit for the ones that are in Montreal, at least in the eastern part of Canada, because today we're doing a lunch live session. So we do these 1 hour toasts basically on a monthly basis. We have a lot of fun doing it. We get the chance for you to meet amazing experts, amazing people. So we're live right now from Toast offices and from Lucinda Tang's office too, because she's the one joining me today for an amazing session where we'll be talking about what's pretty much is on everyone's lips these days, is that the AI and content field are really, really coming together in amazing ways, but there are so many things we need to unpack and talk about. So, for those of you that are on live with us, if you're listening live, do not hesitate to use the chat to send your question throughout the next hour, and we'll be able to together unpack this conversation and this new reality that's been with us for the past few years. So, just to give you a bit of a lowdown, Toast Studio is a content consultancy firm. We focus on content strategy and content operations, but we also tie this into content production, which makes us actually use AI. We're actually chatting about this about a minute ago, Lucinda and I, and we've recently announced a merger with Espresso, which is a great agency working with content with a lot of expertise in linguistics and content production, also in high volume and all sorts of ways. So I won't be diving into this today, but since we actually announced this last week, I wanted to say a bit more about this. So today, for 1 hour, basically the state of AI for content teams. And we usually try to make our live sessions at Toast evergreen. But I quickly realized when speaking with Lucinda how this is not going to be an evergreen session. If you're listening to this, it's in September 2025 or worse, later. Might not even be up to date. Even we'll have to update this and do this on a regular basis because things move really, really fast. So next hour, Lucinda, I see her nodding. I want to introduce you guys to Lucinda. So I have a few notes here because she has an amazing career path that I want to share with you. So Lucinda sent me this. McGill Law graduate, very interesting. Which actually led you to working in tech startups for a while. And actually, you were director of music content and licensing at Premium Beat, which was then acquired by Shutterstock, if memory is good. And then you went on to work as a VP creative production at Design Stripe. So what is Design Stripe, Lucinda?
So Design Stripe was, unfortunately, I think it just got taken offline. An end-to-end AI-powered application where essentially brands would be able to generate content for their social media and also ads for their social media, really respecting their brand visual identity and also tonal communication style. I think we were really early in terms of trying to create a workflow solution. Things look very different now, and we probably would have to build it differently now to do it again. But yeah, that was my experience at Design Stripe, working closely both with the design team, creating the templates for the visuals, and doing a lot of prompt engineering on the product side as well.
So this has led you to now help build custom AI agents with Hologram, a new organization that was just basically founded a few months ago, I think.
Yeah, in March. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are also instructors at InfoPresse. You specifically on AI, myself more on the content strategy side of things, but we have common friends. Usually, for those of you that follow the live sessions that we do at Toast, we follow kind of a regular pattern when one of the two people on screen actually interviews the other. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Lucinda, but the way we do this is that she sent me reading notes and talking points, and I don't have all the details about what's behind those talking points. So we have a lot to unpack on the subject of content and AI. So let's dive right in because I know the people listening just want to hear you on those topics. So first one you sent me is really is really part of the reality that we all live if you're in content or any form of comms or marketing, is that there's so many tools and so many things being thrown at us in terms of platforms, in terms of tools, in terms of ways to use those tools. And it's hard to be able to follow what should be on our radar. So first question, what should be on our radar at this moment, June 2025?
Yeah. Well, one thing hasn't changed in all this time, which is that there's still a ton of tools. There's new ones coming up. There's ones that have survived since, 2022, 2023, which is really impressive in this current.
Yeah, we can actually place the birth of all those conversations, at least in the general public, to basically end of 2023, was it?
Basically ChatGPT and on the visual side Midjourney. I think those were the
Right.
two big triggers for a lot of entrepreneurs to get excited, to have to pivot, that like Design Stripe did, where we realized that what we were doing before wouldn't make sense anymore based on what was going to be very possible soon. Um, the speed of that pivot and waiting for kind of new integrations and technologies to arrive is, I think, what's challenging. It's really timing right now for
Mhm.
entrepreneurs. But I think what's interesting about the fact that there are still many new tools emerging and constantly adapting is that it means that entrepreneurs are seeing opportunities and seeing still ways to optimize workflows that aren't being met.
Mhm.
And to me, almost makes me wonder, does it mean that there's not yet like a clear best way to work with AI? I think if you're a power user versus a general user, if you're an expert versus a generalist in what you're doing on a day to day, if you're doing more admin work, more creative work, your needs and your workflows will be very, very different. And a lot of what people, I think, are trying to do with creating these new tools is to try to make it easier and faster for people to start using these features.
Mhm.
But huge variety. And so, there's trends now as I'm trying these new tools that I'm noticing. There's a shift away from, I think, the conversational interaction. That's obviously what we got
Yeah.
used to with ChatGPT.
And that was the groundbreaking way that we saw, oh my God, this is because AI, of course, has existed for so long, but being able to package it into those chat interfaces made it so accessible to everyone and easy to use.
Because a chatbot, everyone knows, how to interact with a chatbot, and it makes a lot of sense for certain types of tasks. But the reality is, on a day to day basis, it might not be the most efficient workflow once you really get familiar with how you want to use AI. We're seeing obviously more and more in-app features emerging, right? Like the, I don't know, Microsoft Copilot suite, where you can obviously see it being added to Word, added to PowerPoint, added to Excel, and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. There are varying degrees of success and consistency, maybe, but you can see the intention is there, and that's the direction where things are going for existing software that people are already familiar with.
Right.
But then I think the trend that is really exciting is the customizable workflow trend. One of my favorite tools right now to play with is Flora, which is more for visual creation. But you essentially
So
have
Flora,
access.
you mentioned this just before when we went live. I haven't heard about Flora. So it's FLORA.
FLORA, but I believe the URL is florafauna.ai, like a really
Okay.
nice play on play on words. I think it's a play on Laura also, in terms of augmenting kind of image models, and so there's a bit of a nerdiness to it, and I think you can see that in the experience because, and this is what I like about it, you essentially have access to a ton of text models and image models and video models through the one tool. And so, for a power user or for someone who's more experienced, knowing which model is better at which specific type of task,
Mhm.
or for the task that you are just a project you're working on now, what makes the most sense, this is extremely. It's intended to really optimize that workflow where you don't have to be going to each different, you know, I in my field have multiple windows with multiple LLMs open, right? Not
Yep.
everyone does, and I don't expect that of most people. But Flora kind of allows you to just quickly access that. And so if you're very serious about optimizing your visual production workflow with an AI tool, this is one that gives you a lot of freedom, right, to use it the way you want.
Yeah, because we've seen we do a lot of video production at Toast, and we've done that for so long, and we're currently doing a lot of exploration into video AI based or AI generated video, and one of the workflows we see a lot is finding the perfect prompt, which leads to finding the perfect base image, which will then feed the actual video generation. So that's a sequence of tools. It's basically chaining one behind the other,
Yeah.
but having something like Flora or being able to integrate these more closely together could be interesting. Can be an
Yeah,
interesting
and
tool.
like once you have figured out a workflow that works for you, for example, a big one, you know, for commercial purposes is you have a photo shoot for a product, and then you want to extract that product and put it into a different style, a different setting, a different concept, or even just, you know, a standard social media post, for example. Um, there's a workflow there where you want to extract both the object itself, the product itself, but also certain style settings and descriptions and even camera settings and things like that. You can also use reference images, right?
Mhm.
Or you know, in a brainstorming phase. So there's just these various workflows that once you have optimized one, there's going to be trial and error. That's something that still comes up a lot and will, I think, always come up a lot with generative AI. So it's generative, but through that you can then optimize, duplicate, you know, refine that workflow. And it is, and here we're talking about a really AI forward workflow, right? It doesn't have to be like this for every type of content task, but here we're talking about multiple generations working on top or chained together, essentially on
Yeah.
top of each other. And yeah, like you want to be able to see that on a canvas to move things around, delete them. And I think more and more the trend is going towards tools like that.
So you mentioned the fact that moving maybe away from let's call them traditionally based, and it's only been a year and a half, chat based interfaces into more other types of interfaces, integration into tools. And you just mentioned chaining also. So using multiple tools or platforms or LLMs even to basically come to a conclusion. Do we still need to learn prompting? Do we still need to be sensible to proper prompting in those situations?
Yeah, because in even in a workflow, in a prompt chain, there's each step is needs its own prompt, right? And that's where the quality control needs to be. That's where you, as the user, can insert your expertise. And so prompting, the skill of prompting, the knowledge of how to do it well is still, I think, a super important base skill for everyone who wants to get started with
Yeah.
working with AI. Yeah.
And I know we'll touch upon that a bit later. So okay, those are three main things to actually four main things to remember for this first element. Okay, so this is this has to be on our radar. Um, you mentioned Flora. Do you have anything else that's in your current mid 2025 toolkit that just you just keep sharing it with everyone, saying, "Oh, have
Yeah.
you guys seen this? Have you seen this? Have you tried that?"
Yeah, I want my referral, but I
Oh,
do sometimes. No, I'm
yeah,
kidding. I do sometimes feel like I'm just there
yeah.
selling AI tools. I mean, so Claude is the one that I always tell a content team, if you haven't tried it, especially copywriting, if there's any amount of writing involved, also coding, but also writing
Mhm.
involved in your work, you have to try Claude before you kind of give up on it. Obviously, you should not give up on AI, but a lot of people would try ChatGPT, right? Because that was the biggest name, or Gemini, because that's included in a lot of, you know, business suite plans, and just be dissatisfied with the results. The quality of the writing in Claude to me is not comparable. It's just much more nuanced, much more human sounding, obviously with good prompting. But that for me
That
is
was going to be my question. Yeah, it's very good, but if you prompt it properly.
Yes, always. I think that needs to be an asterisk. It needs to be, I think, underlying everything that we say today. But Claude, my fave. I think. Well, I have in the newsletter. You kind of shared a screenshot where I was testing
Yeah.
multiple meeting meeting assistant tools. For the moment, I've set it on Firefly, so that's one that I essentially just have join all my meetings, do the transcripts, create the meeting notes and action items. I think it's very easy to use. One thing I do like about it is that you can customize what you want the outputs, the summaries to look like,
Yeah.
and points to focus on. So if you are actually a huge meeting person, different categories of meetings can give you different outputs that can be customized. So that to me is a pretty good value add.
And this one I like to we use the one you mentioned just now is Fireflies, so Fireflies dot AI, if my memory is good. Fireflies is very good. Actually, it's very good in French too. For those of you that are in Quebec, we realized that it actually it was one of the first that had really good French transcriptions. But what I like in terms of content and the type of work we do is yes to be able to be present in those meetings and take notes. But what I like a lot for content teams for this is to be able to go into a creative meeting with Fireflies or any other note taking app and just be able to just shoot ideas really quickly on the wall, and the note taking will allow you to dive deeper later into those ideas and be able to actually just focus on the creative aspect and not be worried about have we jotted down everyone's ideas. So this is an aspect that I find really interesting.
100%, 100%. And I do, no matter what tool I'm using, if I want to run a deep research task, I will also run it on Perplexity because I still think it's one of the standards in terms of deep research, especially for
Hmm.
problem solving, interestingly enough, not just kind of more academic type research.
Yep.
So I do recommend that as well. Then I think this one is really great for people who do a lot of presentations, like I do. Gamma, GAMMA, which even while at Design Stripe, or just in general as a Design Striper, I think they had the same concept as we did, but for corporate presentations. And
Hmm.
so I'm extremely envious of their success. I think they did an amazing job just in terms of saving a ton of time for formatting, right? Formatting presentations is a huge time suck for those who do it.
Hmm.
And this really simplifies the process. So that's an enormous value added. Flora, as I said. And then speaking again of visual on the more corporate side, I actually really like Recraft. I don't hear people talk about that one too
Right.
much. But I'm super impressed because they allow you to generate image sets, even vector image sets. Another thing that I thought a design chef at the time was really a huge boon, because if you just want to generate a set of vector images of doctor healthcare service in
Hmm.
the same style that are actually downloadable as SVGs. Like they were really early on in being able to provide that in a very convenient, again, kind of canvas style.
So that one is Recraft, right?
Recraft, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
brand guidelines, being able to follow brand guidelines and or style
yeah, so
consistently, because
there
that's one
is
of the hard
that.
things from a
Yeah.
copywriting aspect, from a visual aspect. It's always trying to find a way to be able to consistently be able to generate things that are relevant to the brand itself.
100%. And consistency, I think, is what is always the risk with generative AI, right? Because it's starting from scratch each time. Even with the exact same prompt, you won't get the exact same thing each time. So the fact that it is a single job, basically, that you're launching that generates, for example, 6 SVG image illustrations at the same time, where there's enormous visual consistency, it really removes that risk factor, and
Mhm.
it makes things faster. So big fan of Recraft. And obviously I do, just in terms of staying on top of things, but also educating teams. Midjourney, ideogram, visual electric. These are all, I think, all visual tools now. A big part of how they're trying to make things easier for users is to have a lot of existing style
Hmm.
uh, settings that you can use, which are really just prompts behind the scenes that we don't always see. Sometimes, depending on the tool, they might make it more or less transparent what's actually happening in terms of the prompt itself. And I thought ideogram, it was pretty clear the way they trained it that there was very commercial intent behind the usage in terms of, for example, product photography, corporate lifestyle, stock photography, that sort of thing, as opposed to Midjourney, which started out, I think, as an extremely creative type
Yes.
image generator. So that I think was a big pro for ideogram specifically.
Now, I was jotting those down. Do you have another one to mention?
I could go on forever, so you need to
Yeah. So
stop.
you just mentioned about 10 tools, okay?
Yeah.
And I was seeing Amy's mention in the chat about the fact that okay, those 10 tools actually have a monthly fee, and it starts being quite the puzzle for some larger organizations or smaller ones that want to keep the fees down. So it's not always easy to be able to test or work or become good at those tools. So you need to test, like, let's start a monthly thing on one and then cancel it. Oh shit, we forgot that one, and we got a running bill on that one. But what what makes importance, what is really important in making sure that we have the proper tools, is being able to get good on those tools, to become good at using those tools, and to become good at generating all sorts of and forms of shapes and forms of content. How does one, when starting with a new tool, how do you become good at that?
Oh boy. I mean, so you have to be open to trying new things a lot. I mean, this is the state of things. It's no longer just becoming comfortable with where we're at. We have to be open to adding, changing our text, our personal tech stack. I guess it
Hmm.
would be how you call our tool stack. Um, Everything does cost something. So, I mean, just to answer that point a little bit, LLMs obviously for for written content specifically give you the most control and flexibility over your output. So if you get really really good at using an LLM, you don't really need those tools that are trying to build on top of it, where they're trying to create shortcuts for you. But also with those shortcuts come assumptions about what you want or need, and also about what is a good output. Um, Becoming a really good LLM user, you yourself grow accustomed, you develop the skill of knowing what a good output is and also how to improve it. And that creates a lot of and you're also able in your prompt to more granularly control your input and the steps in between that a
Hmm.
tool might be trying to create shortcuts for you, right? That also applies to visuals, like I was saying. Tools like even Midjourney now, but also Ideogram, they have these existing styles, but maybe what you really want is to create your own style to make it unique, very truly unique, right? Compared to what anyone could pick.
Hmm.
So that is one thing where that developing that knowledge means you pick the tool that gives you the most control, and those
Right.
are the ones you might want to invest in once you're an advanced user. However, um, you it takes a lot of well, first you have to stay curious, right? You have to be pretty patient with yourself and with the process of getting good at these and developing those skills. And ultimately it's your own workflow that you're trying to augment here, so really your needs are what matter at the end of the day, and the level of mastery also over what you're trying to do is going to be what helps the AI tool generate a good output for you. So as we often say when talking about prompt engineering, it's garbage in garbage out, which means that not just your prompt but also the information and the context and the examples that you give it really inform the output, and also what you decide you're using it to for. So if there are certain tasks that are going to, in general, help you out more. And I think developing that skill, you have to kind of um, learn to think like a manager. If you haven't ever managed someone, I think there's a certain degree, uh, like it's a really interesting skill. We're not trying to anthropomorphize or personify our LLMs here, but I
Mhm.
think to a certain degree, knowing how much information to give someone so that they know how to make the right choices in the decision making and how to answer you or generate something is really helpful, because that is something that I think helps inform how you delegate and how you work with an AI tool. And then also, to a certain degree, really wanting to understand how it even works, like how an LLM works versus how an image creation tool works. Interestingly, I think steps are something that come up in both that are pretty interesting. But you essentially, that also creates a certain degree of realism, so that you know what it's capable of and why, if you're getting a bad output, you like why and how you can improve your prompt to then get a better one, right? It's not, it sounds like a lot, but it is kind of a lot. But once you start to get into the weeds of it, I think it is a skill that you can develop with daily use. And yeah, that's the only way ultimately that you can also start to make a more, maybe, I don't know, long term, as we said, ever applies, but a very informed tool choice, because then you
Yeah.
might want to be able to control parameters on a more advanced level, right?
I really like the aspect of trying to know or making sure that you know a bit how it works behind the scenes. You don't need to become an expert or engineer on AI to basically use it, but trying to understand how it thinks, how it works, so that you can better use it or you can better prompt it. And one thing you mentioned is that the fact that the garbage in garbage out is so true. When you don't give it enough context, or when you give it a too generic prompt, and or one of the things that so many people I see do not do is actually give them examples. I would like you to do this. Here are three examples
Yeah.
of what we like in terms of, I don't know, content length, style, name it, and give it examples so that it can be better at outputting what you need. But I think one of the main thing that I really liked in your answer is the fact that we're talking about using AI to improve your own workflow. That's how you said it. The goal of using AI is not to produce content. The goal of AI is to improve your workflow at producing content. And because you had to produce content anyways, that was your task. And you're using AI to do this or to help you do this. And that's a mindset very different from asking it, produce this, rather than can you help me draft this or get me started on this and I'll review it, and in iterative fashion we will get there together. And I think that's one of the key thing that sometimes we forget. We just prompt it and expect magic to come out, and it's rarely magic that will come out at first. It will be extremely generic.
Yeah, and that's definitely a mistake I think a lot of content creators starting out with AI make. If you don't really understand it or use it much, you do start to expect magic, which is something that I guess happens with technology over time. Maybe one day it will be like magic. If you have to ask me how I don't know, a computer motherboard works, I'm not sure I could truly explain it at this point. But at the moment, it is not magic. And so you have to break things down for it. You have to provide a lot of context. You People worry a lot. People are very, very scared about hallucinations, right? Because they don't want to
Mhm.
look stupid. And there's so much in the news that comes out about crazy hallucinations where obviously there was not a human fact checking step happening here. So that's obviously essential too. But hallucination is often because you're not giving enough context or information. You're not giving enough of knowledge for it to work from.
Or
And an
filling
LM,
the gaps.
Yeah, it's filling in the gaps. It always wants to please you. It always wants to, answer you. There's ways around it also, right? If you give it an escape route saying, if you don't have enough context, then ask me for more context rather than just responding right away. These are things, there's lots of ways to get around it. But you have to give it that information, and then you also have to be quite specific about what you want from it, because it's trained on a huge amount of data, and a lot of that data is pretty bland and generic.
Mhm.
And you want a result that's going to stand out and going to be high quality according to your standards, but it has to know what your standards are, right? So you want to really make that clear. You want to help it out. You want to give it examples, like you're saying. And, it's not always easy because you don't want to contradict yourself at any point. And, in examples, you never know what enough or not enough variety is. But just in terms of quality and understanding what you're asking for, examples are a huge, huge shortcut, because rather than breaking down and reverse engineering what's going on in every single one of these
Mhm.
examples, pieces of writing, it can infer, right? It infers patterns, and it infers really, really well. That's something it's really good at. So that's definitely something I think that
So would you say your one is better off to give it rules or give it examples or both?
both.
Because that's okay, perfect. So more context. When you say more context, that's what you mean. More context and
Yeah, I mean, there's context in terms of knowledge. I mean, I think what's interesting coming from the product side, right? You have a system prompt, a developer prompt, and user prompt.
mhm,
This is a little more nerdy and advanced, maybe, but you have kind of more universal context and knowledge. You have very detailed instructions about the behavior that you want, and then you also have the task you're currently working on. And those are three different levels of context or
mhm,
rules. Sometimes the context is rules, and sometimes the context, and sometimes it's examples of good work, right? So um, it's a lot. There can be a lot of information, and I think people may not realize to what extent they can really improve results by taking time just to prepare how they work with the LLM. And projects, by the way, I think not using projects is a mistake for a lot of people. I basically,
projects is, I think, Claude lingo, right? It's
it's in, I think it's in pretty much every
is
LLM,
it? Okay, perfect.
equivalent
Definition.
of projects, which is just having a knowledge base specific to a project. It's pretty self-explanatory. But I never start a new conversation with Claude without it being already attached to a project at this point.
Okay.
I know pretty much what the various, it could be a lot, but the various things that I work on. And so I wanted to have that context. I don't have to re-enter it every time.
So you're
So
basically encapsulating a context so that you don't have to re-enter it, so that it
yeah.
already knows. And it actually it's funny because it actually directly links to Andrian's question about feeding it. Could a brand, for example, feed it its brand guidelines, just upload it, for example, as a PDF or style guide for it to be able to use that as context? Is that the best way to do it?
100%. So I think in a project, if you are, for example, copywriting, you want to include that very, very detailed documentation. And then I think uh, it depends. There's some things that you want to include just in your specific conversation to make sure that it's very focused on that information. Usually, it's whatever document you're currently working on, right? It
Mhm.
could be the draft, or it could be something you're trying to translate, or it could be something you're trying to enhance, or whatever it is. But your actual guidelines, all of that, definitely include that in your project. And historical context can also, I think, help. This is, for example, if you are working with individual clients, for example, it can provide a lot of a more nuanced response. This is maybe more for communication, for like personalizing communications and things
Mhm.
like that. And just honestly, the more the more context, the better. I always say that. Obviously, then at a certain point, you want to remove what's no longer up to date. You do have to keep your stuff in order,
Mhm.
um, just like for your team, right? So you're doing that anyway. I know you are.
That's true. That's true. And so when you were saying earlier, you need to play a lot with the tools so that you get better at it. And then we still have a task to do. We have content to produce, or we have something to review, we have something to prepare. Do you see that as being? I'm speaking more from a manager's point of view, or VP, someone that wants to implement, or CMO that wanting to implement more and more AI into their teams. Is there a point where at first it might actually slow down the team a bit while they're playing and learning, and juggling with the tools before it actually gets to a better and improved workflow? Should that be planned into the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, like taking that time to try things is not right. It does take time. That's super normal, and I think some things that people, when we talk about AI, we're especially on the leadership management level, we're thinking efficiency, productivity, time
Yeah.
saving, uh, generate 100% more content with the same team size. The things that people say are obviously very ambitious with reason. You see often people see their competition kind of generating more content, and so they feel pressure, and the statistics do show that in marketing there is a pretty high AI adoption, I think, probably compared to other
Mhm.
teams. But ultimately, there, like, it can create a little bit almost of a toxic positivity, and I think a bit of a up like top down pressure, for leaders just to say, okay, now everyone, we have to start using AI all the time, and now I'm expecting results, right? There is the question of actually getting good with the tools and educating your team, which is important and takes time. Um, Even, I've given a lot of half day sessions, sometimes longer 1 day sessions,
Yep.
but there needs to be a time of practice and implementation, right? To actually digest, understand, and especially with creative teams, there often is a certain degree of resistance because you're not getting results that are as good as what you know and what
Yep.
you value as a creative, which is super valid. And then I think in larger teams where there could be cultural, generational kind of variety and differences in opinions, there can also be resistance to using AI for other reasons. All these things I think should be talked about openly if you really want a culture that is positive and productive using AI, because otherwise, when it's top down, it can sometimes feel a little bit toxic. And maybe people are saying they're using it or are using it, but then they're complaining on Reddit about, that email that you sent saying everyone had to use AI and so on. So it's not,
Are you thinking about Duolingo by any chance?
I'm not naming any names,
Okay,
uh,
I am.
but ultimately, well, that's what you want, is to implement a culture, right? So that means you spend the time to talk about it, you build up advocates internally, you create places and platforms for sharing, for teams to share their wins and successes and learnings. And like you said, that time commitment cannot be ignored. I've done them, but I don't think a half day session is enough. It's enough
Mhm.
for people to get curious about it and to be wowed by it, but it's not enough to actually say, okay, now this is actually happening in my workflow and I'm actually saving the amount of time that everyone wants me to
Yeah,
save.
and
Right?
I know that that's one thing that we're actually recommending to those clients when we plan workshops together on that specific aspects of marketing, is that you need to have this first. Let's put everyone on the same level in a way to create that conversation and that openness, because you were mentioning in your notes that there are things that separate teams that do AI integration properly and teams that struggle with integrating AI into their practice, especially for content teams in our case. So openness and being able to talk together and give each other feedback from leadership to the teams and back and forth to be able to find the proper way. So that's one thing that you see a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You want the human role also to be validated. And it's something that, I talk about augmenting human capabilities with AI. And everything we've said so far is so much about prompting and sharing that expertise in order to get a good result. And who judges the good result? It's the person, right? Sorry, it's the human being and team member there.
Yeah.
Um, I, I think a lot of teams at this point, especially, there's people that are just playing with the tools on their own in their corner. And for sure, there's going to
Some of
be
them hiding.
no, but there's small ways that, people individually find to accelerate their workflows just
Yeah.
normally, but without necessarily thinking about it more on the level of collaboration and team level. But there's so much expertise to be shared within a team. And there's going to be people who are naturally better prompt engineers. Like, it's a skill now, right? So there's going to be
Mhm.
people who are going to be naturally more attuned to it, and people who are maybe naturally just going to be just a user, right? If the feature's there, they'll use it, but they might not want to push further, but they might have other strengths. And so I think when you're managing your teams now and planning how they work, if you want that augmentation to happen also on the team level, you need to take those things into account now as well. And that's something that I think is different from before, right? Because before, well, right now, let's say if you haven't fully integrated AI in your team's workflow, everyone is working based on their tasks and their skill set for accomplishing those tasks.
Right.
And now, kind of bringing in that level of AI augmentation to it could change that collaborative workflow a bit, and that kind of change takes time, right? You want to plan it, and I mean, you can do it organically as well, but in an informed way, right?
Yeah, and the sharing part that you mentioned, being able to some people are better at prompting, some people are better at finding new tools, and putting all that together. It's also about that openness, that conversation, that sharing. It's not about let's have someone dive deep into one tool for 2 weeks without speaking to anyone and then come back with a conclusion. I don't think either that's the best way to do it.
No, I mean, there's a danger to that. I mean, I can see how it's when we talk about AI, developing AI advocates internally or experts, because we do want, right, to have kind of autonomy and expertise once AI is fully integrated within an organization so that they can keep going. But that siloing of the knowledge, I think, at least at this current stage, is not really where we want to be at. We might be used to it sometimes because of how IT works, and some
Mhm.
people just really don't want to, I don't know, have anything to do with tech. But at this point, I don't think this is what's happening with AI. I think it's really touching everything and every single workflow, and so there's this minimum of curiosity and adaptability that I think we need to teach teams to work with or get back in touch with if for whatever reason that's not been their way of working.
And those approaches, do they apply the same to smaller teams or larger teams? Because you just mentioned, for example, you might be in a large organization that you can't even access ChatGPT's website. It's chat.com is not available.
Yeah.
Same with Anthropic or Claude and Claude. So how does that work depending on team size?
Definitely, I think if you are a smaller team, most of the time, we're talking about people who wear many hats, who are used to wearing many hats, who are generalists. I think AI adoption is generally faster and also often extremely voluntary in the sense that that opportunity to maximize your capacity. Everyone's on a smaller team often feels a bit overworked. There's too much to do and never time to do everything you want to do. So in that sense, I think adoption can be easier, but also you don't see it happen as much, like I was saying, about in that kind of team synergistic level, because often each person is their own team
Hmm.
sometimes multiple teams, right? But what's wonderful, I think, there is that if you are generalist with AI, you have access to a certain degree of specialist knowledge and capability, which you didn't before. If you are curious and if you like learning and if you know how to interact with it, and that is incredible. It's invaluable, and a huge fan of that. Um, but then with larger teams, also, I think a struggle is, I mean, a valid one, is security, privacy,
Right.
compliance, those sorts of
Very
things,
important.
right? Where, in marketing, obviously, I'm not your legal team. Always listen to your legal team. However, in marketing, the benefit I think there is that we're usually creating content that is intended to be public. So we're not, manipulating private employee data and things like
Hmm.
that. So it's less of a concern a lot of times. Same thing if we're running research tasks where we're inputting not as much, but really trying to get a larger output. But yeah, that is something that can be a bit of a blocker in
Hmm.
terms of just trying out every tool and getting access to every single tool out there, unfortunately. But that's where I would say really developing your skill set with LLMs, like the basics. It's the basics, but it's really the one that can also give you the most fine control. So, yeah.
And for some people, I mean, use it at home, try it at home also, plan your next vacation using it. So there's so many ways to actually discover how to test the tools without actually maybe using it at work. Adrienne has a great question regarding actually that part where how do you manage AI integration into marketing and content teams, and the fact that some people might give some pushback because of the fact that they feel they can become redundant, because if AI adoption becomes too good, their jobs might be in jeopardy. So I like how she ends it. Any wisdom to share, Lucinda?
I mean, these are the concerns that I think should be shared openly when I'm talking about transparency, and about accepting AI as part of the culture. One thing's for sure is that if you are a content creator who can use AI, your job is a lot safer than a content creator who can't. But really, we're still talking about augmentation right now.
Hmm.
And so that means that if you were working 9 to 7 before, maybe that means now you can be working 9 to 5, right? Or even have an extra break in the middle that we don't need to, tell people about. And that's where we kind of want to focus. I think a lot of people I talk to are looking for growth, without growing their team size right now. Obviously, that does have a downstream effect, but it's also not the same thing as reducing your team size. Um, the the talk about the ethical and kind of long-term effects of this technology are it's a very large conversation that obviously I don't feel I can solve, but uh, definitely, it's a competitive right now.
Hmm.
It is a question of competition, and so people are looking at what their competitors are doing, and they are trying to essentially meet those new standards with the teams that they have. And so learn to use it, and learn not just to use it, but also to how to validate and augment your knowledge and skills and expertise through it, right?
And I
Yeah.
really want to put that in bold. You mentioned this very quickly, but you've said that a few when we had a meeting a few weeks ago when we were having a meeting to talk about a mandate, and you said making a 9 to 7 day into a 9 to 5 day. And you mentioned earlier improving your own personal workflow. I think really that is the posture that content teams need to have right now. It's not currently about replacing anything, it's about improving, augmenting. It's about doing things that were not that you were not able to tackle before, but now that you can move a bit faster when the tool is properly handled and when you have a good grasp on it, you can actually do better work, augmented work. And from 9 to 7, if you're working 9 to 7 and now you can work 9 to 5, I think that's a great analogy of what it can bring. I really love that way of seeing things, because that is actually what's happening right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel it definitely myself, and I'm very, very grateful for it. And in your personal lives too, like I highly encourage you to try finding. This is like a just a good way to practice to find
Mhm.
where the pain points are and what can be augmented. Or, when we talk about automation, I think that's a word that a lot of people get worried about, because we think automation means replacement, but the reality is there is a lot of extremely tedious stuff that we do or did, for those who are already using AI for it, but that we do on a day-to-day basis that can be delegated. And so let's start there.
And we do actually use it. We've talked a lot today about content creation, but there are so many other things that can be used by content team that where AI can be very interesting. One of the things we did for one client is that we had, I don't remember how many hundreds of blog posts that we had to audit. So we basically we worked with Claude on this one to basically do data analysis on content pillars and content themes, and be able to look at frequency and be able to basically, with the proper queries, being able to get data very quickly that allowed us to spend more time on insights
Yeah.
instead of data entry and data manipulation. So these are other types of ways where we can actually spend more time on the proper things, the things that bring the most value to the brand, to the organization, to the client in our case. So this is how AI can also augment what we do.
Yeah, cleaning, data cleaning, reformatting, all that stuff. When I do
Mhm.
Excel demos to teams that do a lot of data manipulation, that's always wows them. They're grateful to have that, just to be able to reformat and um, make consistent the thousands of rows of data, right? So those tedious things, and it turns out that, yeah, we all kind of want our meeting notes to be done for us.
Yeah.
So those sorts of things are wonderful.
And we'll actually be generating the summary of this session using Fireflies later, and we'll send it to everyone. Okay, a few minutes left. Looking at your crystal ball, what's coming up? What do you see coming next, or what do you see on the horizon in terms of content creation, content management, and AI?
Yeah. I mean, things are obviously going really fast, right? You see with video how improvements are happening.
Hmm.
So I think you kind of have to have the assumption always that whatever is kind of not performing super well now is being worked on, and a few months down the line will work eventually. I'm talking especially about things like in visual creation. There's certain styles that may still not be strong enough. Maybe text generation is not as strong. Maybe
Right.
character and object consistency and things like that are really essential for a good output. Those are all things that are being worked on. AI avatars is something that is, I think, also extremely where a few months ago you're like super uncanny, and more you're like, oh, I see
Hmm.
where this is going.
Right. Yeah.
So all of these things in terms of I mean, it is pretty extraordinary. um, Agentic workflows, I think it's interesting because, like I was saying, with automation, you want to make sure you're picking the right places in your workflow to automate or delegate. But there's definitely a huge rise in agentic workflows, especially customized to individual businesses, and their servers and knowledge bases and all
Hmm.
their data and so on and so forth. So something with hologram that I'm working on, really customizing these. teams of agents to do tasks. And again, it's making these agents available to existing team members who want to have their workflow augmented, but really, really simplifying the process, whether it's accessing information or just getting certain tasks done. And yeah, I think ultimately what we where we're working towards, us as like a team member, a worker, is trying to figure out where we as the human creatives are going to create the most value, knowing that things are moving in this direction and they're moving fast. And it's matter for reflection. Like, it doesn't, the answer will not come to you right away, but there's an element, I think, of self-reflection in terms of what you love to do and where you think can bring value, and then there's a sense of adapting to the reality of it. But there is place definitely. And I work with clients where sometimes their business itself is extremely human forward, right? So we're not going to generate uh, AI avatars for existing human services, right?
Yeah.
So, all of that you have to take all of this into account. It's just, yeah, being aware of where things are headed.
Well, I really, really, really enjoyed this talk. We could go on for another 2 hours, which we might schedule together. We'll have to do that. If anyone wants to double click on some of the things we chatted about today, don't hesitate to reach out to the team at Toast. We can schedule workshops, trainings, and so on in terms of AI and content teams. That's one thing. The other thing, thank you very much for everyone who attended. We didn't have the chance to go to every question. Well, Eric, I'll check with Lucinda after the session to see if she has an answer for you. And for Remy, maybe we can take the 9 to 7 to 9 to 5. And Remy said, why not take it to 9 to 3? So we'll see about that. So everyone, thank you so much for the time spent today. Go augment your workflows. I think that's one of the key takeaways for the session today. Augment your workflows and find ways to use AI in your content practice. Thank you very much, Lucinda,
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
and have a great day, everyone. See you soon.